guest. I've got a friend and colleague, Mr. Brian T. Collins, and I'm going to bring Brian on in a second. But yeah, I just wanted to say, yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're tuning live or if you're watching via the YouTube broadcast, remember it's Thread to Threshold. I've got a little banner down the bottom there if you want to jump on and subscribe. And yeah, and later on, once this video's gone live on Facebook Live, once it's finished, I'll upload it to YouTube. Having a few issues with getting the YouTube live stream going via this Be Live platform. So anyway, so I'm just going to bring Brian on, and yeah, we're going to go straight into it. We're going to talk about a little bit about Brian's background and also what he does and what he offers and his innovation in the field of sound healing, which is absolutely fascinating. I really hope you enjoy what we're going to bring to the table here. Brian's a very knowledgeable, interesting, fascinating man. He's had all sorts of very interesting experiences, and I feel very honored to call him my friend. And I've been looking forward to creating a bit more of a formal platform to bring some people forward where they can, share their story, their truth, and what they're up to. And and I can speak from experience with Brian's technology as well. But anyway, enough of me talking. Let's bring Brian on. So I'm just going to unmute him. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. And yeah, so I've got you. You should be coming through nice and loud and clear.
There you go.
And yeah, cool. Okay, so Brian, thank you so much for giving us some time. Now there is a bit of a time difference, but it's not too bad. And I just want to say, how's things over there at the moment? We're in such a weird time at the moment. How do you feel? What's the vibe where you live at the moment? You're in Canada, in Vancouver.
Yeah. Well, how much do you want me to filter this? Right. There's different levels, right, of what is going on in the world, and there's a lot. What we're definitely seeing across the board is we're seeing globally the levels of stress is going through the roof, regardless. Yeah. And then one of the things I've been helping people recently, and we'll talk about it as we get going, is that it's going beyond normal stress levels. What's happening is people are starting to wake up to see that media, just how much media is being used to basically create trauma-based mind control on the general public. And it's something I'm very familiar with, as we'll go on through the call, how I got familiar with that kind of topic and stuff like that. But so in terms of what's happening here, I mean, Vancouver is a big metropolis. It's the hub between the West and the East. So if you want to go to Asia, you usually go through Vancouver. The same thing goes with trade and port. So, there's a lot of trade that comes through Vancouver. Vancouver is one of the top 5 most expensive cities in the world to live. It's a very cosmopolitan city. It's beautiful because it's nested right up between the Rockies and the Pacific Ocean. So there's lots of nature here. It's a beautiful place to live. But yeah, like everywhere else, is we're seeing the effect. I mean, it's amazing to walk out and it's like I feel like in a Will Smith movie, I Am Legend. The city's deserted, and it's kind of interesting because a lot of places are starting to board up, because whatever's going to be coming in, if something really happens with where they pull the global financial system, if they don't start resetting economies fast, we could see a terrible slide. And so, they're just kind of preparing, I guess, in case there's a drop in the money supply and rioting and stuff. But I don't know. I think we got to hope for the best, and we got to keep the levels of psychic kind of positivity up, because fear and stress, I mean, we'll get into it, but that can do more damage on the body than the virus. So
that's a very important point, what you've just raised there, because
we'll go into the detail of that a little later as we get going.
Cool. Yeah, and I think this is it too. There's so much information about this thing that's going on right now, and it's really so easy to get sort of mired down in it and become overwhelmed by it. But right now, let's talk about, let's talk a little bit about, your story, and so, how you kind of, in a nutshell, kind of, how you came to where you are with your harmonic integration.
Well, I mean, usually I just jump right in and go from how I came out of leaving basically a professional music career, as I was a hired gun. And, I used to be flown in sometimes to do big gigs, and I would replace a band member and stuff. And so I would go up, and I had a reputation of being able to learn a repertoire extremely fast because of my ear. I did get formally trained in music later on as an adult. I went to college for jazz performance, but my whole life, actually, I was self-taught. And that largely happened because when I was 5 years old, I'm from Glasgow, Scotland. I was born there. And I was struck by a car. And the nature of the accident was I went completely underneath the car. And I was lucky that I didn't get killed. But when the back tire hit my head, and it was just the angle or whatever, it didn't crack my skull. I was like completely, I went to hospital, and I actually was in the news. I had tire marks down the side of my head. And so I had a brain injury from that. And it was back in the early 1970s in Glasgow. Not the best medical system in the world. And so, stuff was kind of overlooked, right? It was kind of like send them home. That's the end of it. But it caused quite an effect in me. And so I shied away from some gifts I had most of my life, mostly intuitive gifts. And I was very sensitive to the world, in terms of frequency. So when I was, after this accident at 5, I used to suffer from ear infections, and so I kind of gained an ability to really be sensitive to frequency, and out of the blue, I just was able to play music. So without ever having taken any lessons, I sat down when I was young at the piano and just started playing it. And my folks, they used to actually show me off at parties. They would say, "Oh, play that song from the TV," and I listened to it and I play it and stuff. So that's kind of like I was kind of a natural, but I didn't really get into music until my family went to Canada, and we went to Toronto in 1980, and I was bought a bass guitar for my 12th birthday, and I picked it up and I could just play it, and so I started learning. Here's the interesting thing is that it came with 3 free lessons, and so it was like I went in and I said to the guy, I said, "Oh, I want to learn Rush," because that was for me, that was my go-to was Rush. So I wanted to learn the songs of Rush. So it ended up the guy was like, after the second lesson, he said, you're better than me. And I'm not trying to brag, I'm not, right? It's just for some reason I went out and I spent all week practicing it and stuff, and I learned all it, and I came back and he played it, and I said, no, it's actually kind of like this. So that was, I didn't go back. So I only actually had the 2 lessons, and I kind of survived off that and built my own way of being able to learn songs and stuff like that. And I slowly started getting into the normal thing. You get in a rock band, then you play in bars, and I played in the Toronto music scene for years, and then I got into touring, and oh my God, I did the whole, paid my dues on the road, living in hotel rooms and playing in hockey arenas across Canada, mostly on the eastern seaboard. And so that's kind of like how I encapsulated. And I thought, well, I want to be That's what I wanted to be, right? Was a musician. But one of the things that really got me was because I had a brain injury when I was a kid, and I was kind of sensitive, and I know a lot more now about science and piezoelectricity and stress density, all this stuff. I basically I would suffer these. Oh, Phillips, it was agony. I used to suffer these horrible migraines, like after if I was playing in a gig, or if I was especially in the studio. I was wearing the studio cans for hours, when I'm recording and stuff like that. So the music, the way music was tuned, it was agonizing for me. And rewinding a little back was my father was a lover of jazz, and so he had these like old 78s. Was it 78s? Yeah, I think it was 78s, right? The bigger, thicker records, right, from the 1920s and 30s. And so some of that music was tuned down low. So I remember I used to lay under the kitchen table as a boy in Glasgow, and I'd listen to the drums and the bass. And I was really attracted to the bass. It was the low end. So I naturally went into playing bass. That's when I got my bass for my 12th birthday. And anyway, so it turns out when I was learning Rush tunes with my buddy, he used to, in order to try and learn all that like fancy stuff, right? He used to slow the record player down. And it's back before what we have now with digital transposition and all that. It still retains the pitch and you can slow it. So the pitch used to drop as you used to slow the record player down. So I felt it was warmer and stuff, and so that was really big for me. And then I took a bicycle trip back to Scotland in 1987, and that's what changed my life. That's what led me to everything I'm doing and have been doing for my whole life's work, which is basically studying sound at ancient sites and stuff. I was up in the north of Scotland. I was visiting standing stones, and I was going to like climb this mountain, Sullivan Mountain, and if anyone wants to Google that, in Scotland. And I was sitting on this like stone apex, and I had this like really crazy kind of effect thing. It was like almost kind of like a standing wave, like it doesn't actually exist outside. And I realized that standing waves because all of this stuff is created in the brain, right? But it was like a low frequency, and that was like, I felt alive. I felt like awakened, and I was like, "What the hell was that?" And that experience of hearing it, we've all experienced that, where all of a sudden you hear some kind of phantom tone. Wow. So anyway, that's what that got my curiosity going of what sound around ancient sites and stuff like that. So I started looking into that.
It's cool. Yeah, so thank you.
Kind of a little bit of a background of, but it's like moving forward is, like I said, is I used to suffer these horrible tension headaches. So when I would lower the pitch, it would relieve that for me.
It's funny you talk about, like the older tunes were kind of maybe a little, dropped down a little bit, because maybe the guys weren't always tuning their instruments up. They were tuning to someone, but I noticed that, when I would jam myself to say like Jimi Hendrix and things, he was apparently a half step back. I'm actually wondering if that was the case. I actually think it's just that his instrument may have naturally drifted back. And I found that, I had a beautiful Fender Stratocaster that was a modified one with a Floyd Rose, all factory fitted, a Floyd Rose and a Fender Strat with a humbucker locking nut, and it was, quite a rare thing. And what I found was that, I picked this thing up. They're good quality guitars, Strats, right? I've had some nice Strats in my time, and this thing, I pulled it out of the case, and it hadn't been played for years. It was actually lent to me, and it was perfectly in tune. It hadn't been played in years. And I was playing, I was like, man, this is awesome, and I checked it, and it was a little bit down. It wasn't like a half step or anything like it was just a little bit down. So I cranked it up, And then I put it away for another 6 months because it needed a lot of work done to it because it had had a rough life. It had been well played. And then another 6 months, whatever, I pulled it out again and I picked it up and it was still in tune beautifully. And I was like, oh yeah. And then I checked the tuning and it had drifted back a little. And I found that with my other Strat as well, is that it kind of just naturally kind of drifted back. And it wasn't, I mean, you know, I wasn't aware of the conversation about the 432, but it was like it was much nicer. It was, like you said, it was warmer, it was rounder, if that's the right kind of, you know, terminology. And yeah, so I kind of hear what you're saying, and I think that the old school dudes who would sit around and jam out, the girls and the boys, whatever, would you know, their instruments, they didn't maybe tune them up every time, and maybe they were tuning to, they were playing more live, I guess, and so they would, you know, there'd be a lead instrument like the guitar, or, you know, I'm not too sure how they would maybe tune to the vocal, but you know, but yeah, you know, so I totally hear you with the effect of the sound as well, because I've noticed that since I've become a lot more sensitive myself to things that you know, I appreciate, you know, a little music that's a little bit lower down from listening to lots of rock, you know.
It's interesting you mentioned. We'll get into 432 because what people need to know is that there's been a campaign to stop 432, to censor it, shadow censor it. We'll get into that later. So what you would read about 432, especially that's come out in recent years about 432, all over the internet about conspiracy theory, it's just not true. It's stuff that's being censored for a reason, is because, you know, there's been research that's come out to suggest that, yeah, there really is a benefit to lowering you know, music or having sound. It's actually, as an innovator, I like to you know, just naturally make things better. You know, it's increase of efficacy, and if you go through innovations, as innovations driving markets and stuff like that. So it's like even the littlest leg up can mean a lot, you know. So so there's one thing that is in recent years, and we'll get into this later, is because there's been a lot of stuff, because I'm blowing the whistle on conspiracy theory, because conspiracy theory is used as disruption strategies to, you know, stop, you know, information that gets out. So yeah, we'll talk about all that kind of stuff. One thing I really want to hit home, because there's been a lot of you know, misinformation written about me, because I am actually coming forward with it, and this type of information, is that number one is that my original thing that I was promoting for years had really nothing to do with the 432 movement that sprung up online. You know, people in the 432 movement grabbed on and gravitated to some of my articles to use that as ammunition. But really, as I've always said, that music is a very subjective feeling. Of course it is. It's like, we'll never be able to even like see an orange the same color of orange, right? We're all interfacing through our subjective conscious experience. So I've always been a strong advocate of me keeping my mouth here. You try it for yourself. See if you like that, you know. And that way, it takes me out of the equation, because I'm wanting honest, innovative reporting for data, so you can see, you know, how other people's experiences are. So in that is, I recognize that in innovations, there's a thing called disruptive innovation, which is the most riskiest innovation to bring to market, because it can disrupt other markets or disrupt other competitors. So I realized that the music industry is a vast, well-oiled machine, wink, wink, and so the whole thing is not to upset the apple cart as much as possible. So obviously, with the whole thing of what's been misconstrued about you know, these things is trying to replace the entire whole you know, tuning system or entertainment system. That's just not true. You know, the idea from what I was originally campaigning for, word of mouth, for years was to have a separate innovative preservation pitch, because old historical instruments, and this is something the Schiller Institute was mentioning when they had their conference. Basically, the 432 movement was born on April 9th, 1988 or 89, I can't remember, in one of those years, right? So it was before other frequencies came out, that made kind of counterclaims or whatever, but definitely 432 was first. My thing was a little bit different, because I was kind of campaigning for a kind of a preservation pitch between 427 and 438. And there's reasons for that I'll get into a little later, about coherent and incoherent frequencies found in nature. Because people think that raising vibration or lowering vibrations, but things sit in between harmonic variances of coherence, and that's a fascinating subject, because there's a birth cycle, and then there's an entropy death cycle. So there's right.
Is it like it's like a pocket, isn't there?
Right, and then there's this whole misconception that's been pushed heavily by this kind of controlled opposition psyop to try and steer 432 into a conspiracy. We can debunk all that stuff. Oh God, it'd be so easy for me to do all that, right? Because and there's a lot of stuff written about that 432 hertz was the ancient standard tuning. Well, come on, people, they didn't use hertz values in the ancient world. We measure it in based off of the arbitrary length of the second, right? So that's what I'm saying. There's so much that it can be said. It's just give the word and we'll jump in. And
okay, you brought up something really important there, and that is that the instrumentation we use, that's like a blanket form of like how we identify and categorize things. Back in the ancient days, it was done very differently. It was done by observation and and in the subjective sense, about say how someone felt. You could you put the blindfold on them or whatever, and some kind of sensory deprivation, or they'd shut their eyes and they would experience things and they would notice how things would feel. We've also mentioned this in previous sort of lives when we've talked about how they would chant across water and that they would see the geometry, the cymatic geometry appear and things like that. And now we go, well, it's like they talk about, it's like, this frequency on the button, but there's a sort of like a standard deviation either side. And I did mention prior, when I was teaching kids in schools, I did a 3-month experiment where I would be teaching, groups of 4 primary school kids, normally about four kids, and they'd all have these, little nylon string guitars, that are famous for, going out of tune, and the kids aren't very good at tuning them, and they should just not try and tune them. But they would. I started tuning their guitars, and I found a 432 tuner. It's funny how hard it is to find a 432 tuner, man. Like a little plastic one. They don't normally go down to that. They normally go down to 435 or somewhere around there, but hardly ever go down to 432. Anyway, so I started tuning all the guitars, and what I noticed is that because the first 5 minutes of the lesson, I'd be tuning guitars before the lesson would start. Within the first couple of weeks, I noticed that it didn't take me that much, that the guitars would stay in tune better when they would come back to lessons. Now, I don't know why. There's obviously some kind of physics behind that, but I also noticed that
physics on it,
yeah, there's a sweet spot. Like when you tune, it's like, it's like, when you're under the note and when you're over the note, when you overtune. What I noticed was when I was tuned to 432, or in that area, that region, the amount of time that it would spend in that sweet spot was longer, it was extended. But when I was in 440, it was much harder to get to that sweet spot of, well, if you call it a sweet spot, where it was tuned to 440, but it was much easier to do it to this 432. And that's what really grabbed my attention, because like I said, I did this for about 3 months, and there's other things I could talk about. But anyway, this isn't about me. This is about you, my friend. And so one thing I wanted to go into, because, what you've innovated, what you've created recently, with harmonic integration, via your website, which is, I just want to share that quickly, which is briantcollins.com. so everyone can go and check that out. And I'll put a note up when I give Brian a prompt to start talking. I'll put some things down the bottom so people can start having a look. You know, when we were talking about stress and how we're, you know, experiencing a level of stress globally that might have been something akin to what happened on, say, 9/11, when the electromagnetic, the satellites orbiting the planet picked up an electromagnetic spike or a magnetic spike prior to the Twin Towers falling. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but there's
so these spikes happen in consensus, collective consciousness, because I could go in. Well, the other thing too is you need to realize is, number one, I'm not a scientist, I'm an innovator. So as an innovator, what I do is I look at science research and I connect dots. So I'm basically a dot connector that makes things better. So a researcher, somebody that's been gotten a grant to keep them on bread and butter while they do the research, right? I don't get paid until I make the actual innovation, and then it goes to market, and then I either would get an equity share or whatever, right? So that's how that works. So as a dot connector, I don't make any money, right?
I hear you.
And then the other thing too, so there's another important thing, because for years people have been saying, share your research, Brian. No, because it's got trade commercial secret value to it.
You know, this is a thing too, because
and
you know, because there is if you go and get a patent on things, that can be used against you. In fact, people say don't go and get patents because basically, you know, it's like the guy who created the water powered car. I can't remember his name.
Myers.
Yeah, that's the one. You know, like
don't end up like a Stan Myers. No, seriously, there's been that could be a whole other call, because the stuff is right. So here's the thing: is right. People, especially talking heads, academic cerebrals. You know, I don't mean to impugn you guys, but the whole thing is you know, it's like your bread and butter and your underwear is all laid out for you in the morning, right? So academic science deals with what was. It's not dealing with what drives markets. It's not dealing with what drives economies, which is innovation. And so there's a lot of private funded research that's going in to innovation constantly. I mean, innovation's it's spearheading everything. And there's also a dark side to innovation, because you know, peer review is being corrupted over the years. So what's happening is there's big money that's being funneled into things to specifically so that things don't see the light of day. And that shocked the hell out of me when I learned that. It's like, oh my God. Now I'm under non-disclosure agreements with some people. So there's certain things I can't talk about, but I can kind of hint around, because these are people who are top high level, is like they've been working on energy stuff that could literally, I've seen a device that was like that what it does is it takes it takes something to do with the oscillation rate of the sun, and then converts it into a thing that stores it in a battery. And then these batteries, you can just take these things and drop them down in a shipping container, and it can power a small village.
Oh, man, yeah, we could talk about the sun till the cows come home, and how people aren't aware just how much the sun impacts what goes on in our lives. But that could even go for other celestial bodies too,
I mean,
right?
I'm just using that as an example. Yeah. There's laser technology that can, using laser induction, it can literally take pain away in seconds. So what I'm kind of hinting at is, you know, you've got these repeaters that come out of school, you know, who are really mind conditioned to really, oh, you know, I've got a PhD and I'm full of knowledge, and this is the way it is because they were a good repeater in school. So they'll repeat the curriculum and they're rewarded so,
yes.
Right? But that curriculum is like, to private research, it's kind of like, it's out there, right? But again, is what that is. It's like a coffee filter. It's a firewall between actually what's really going on, and there's all these silent wars that is going on between different energies and innovations. And this is what I'm saying is that in certain innovations is there's a lot of stuff that's disruptive innovations that are shelved because they don't want it to impact markets. So in regards to 432, I mean, we'll get into why how that is an innovation with stuff, but specifically what it was done was it was kind of steered with misinformation on the internet to say that it was a revolution by certain people to try and take over the music industry and change music worldwide to 432. And then you've got this other stuff that's trying to raise it up even higher or whatever as a counter intel thing that was going on right from 96, 97, 98 onwards when that other information was brought in. So specifically, this is what I can't say this enough, was I recognize that. So I recognize that the importance of having a separate preservation pitch that doesn't affect the normal entertainment standard of 440 and all of these other things. You know, I've written about some of this stuff before, and I haven't really updated a lot of stuff because of, we'll get into, you know, I got quite close to things and a little bit targeted for what I was doing, but specifically when you've got something that can disrupt a market, well, what's used is there's means to go in and then infiltrate and kind of poison the information so that the general public they don't read past the headlines. So they rarely go, and then again look, even most musicians don't study the harmonic overtone series, the undertone series, and these kind of things. So it's like, you know, you get up, you play guitar and do stuff, but what's all the physics behind harmonic ratio, right? Or what's the physics behind equal temperament is logarithmic spirals and fast Fourier transforms. So what I'm trying to say is, and then here's another thing too, is terminology. So for an example, I could be talking to somebody that would know that kind of stuff at that level with certain things with ratios, but someone might not know, well, what was the word he just used? I've never heard of fast Fourier transform or logarithmic spirals or, you know, equal.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't learn about that.
But then if I was to talk to somebody that was like, say, a new ager, I would say, oh yeah, it's like it makes you feel relaxed and it brings a calm over you. And so what I'm saying is it depends on what your audience target sector is on what you're talking to. Yeah. So specifically is if I was going to, like I say, if I was going to be talking to someone in new age, I'd be explaining things in terms of an energetic thing. If I was talking with physics, I'd go a little bit more into that. Right, and across the board, and I'm not saying by any means that I'm an expert, right? Because I realize is the more that you learn something, is you realize you actually know nothing. there's so much to learn. Right?
Yeah, that's all very pertinent because you know, there is huge gaps in the public sort of knowledge lexicon when it comes to, you know, this terminology and things. It's very important because, you know, a lot of people will hear, you know, these words come out and just go, whoa, you know. So, but, you know, I really want to just shift gears a little and move into the service that you've created. Well, even more the technology that you've created and what you're able to share, because as you mentioned, you know, like this is you know, there are large interests. I mean, when we're talking about disruptions to markets and things like that, we're talking about $billion+ situations here, and they don't like letting go of that stuff. You know, if you're going to disrupt them, there's going to always be pushback. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to, you know, your website, briantcollins.com, you've got the harmonic integration page on there, which is to do with stress management and stress reduction and stress less. And so what I'd love you to talk about, if you could please, is if you go into, you know, what is stress, you know, from your perspective.
Well, specifically is as uncomfortable as this is, we're animals. Human beings are animals, right? We're animals, and in as much as we'd like to think that we're king of the pile, so to speak, in terms of evolution, we're still animals, and we still have animal behavior. And so part of the animal behavior is just like in the animal kingdom, is your body is wired with a nervous system, so you can sense and feel. And so if you the natural condition of stress is that stress is actually there as a warning alarm system, so to speak, stressors. And so what happens is we have the sympathetic nervous system, and that kicks in, and that creates a condition called the fight or flight, condition, which is just like in nature, how, like, say, a gazelle is running away from a tiger, right, or a lion or whatever. It's being chased. All of a sudden, it's grazing, and then it's got to run for its life. So it's like, whoa, kicks in, and then it goes and it reacts. So and so what happens is this: when the gazelle is out of danger, what it will naturally do is, because the stressors has built up all kinds of things in the body, and also acidic conditions, and there's chemical changes in the brain, there's chemical changes in the muscles. The natural condition for all higher order biological life is to shake a trauma out, right? And this is why you see an animal, when an animal's stressed out, after it's stressed out, it will shake. You'll see a dog shake. You'll see a polar bear shake. You'll see a gazelle shake. We see human beings are quite different, because we've adopted this mind called an ego. And so what happens is we've got essentially three areas of the brain. We've got the reactive mind, the constructive mind, the rational mind. And so the constructive mind will build pictures of thoughts around something. And so what that can actually do is it can freeze or halt the fight or flight stressor release. And so if we're kept in a place where we're in fear, and our nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system is not kicking in, and what that does is it can cause a loop, a feedback loop. And this is where it's hard for people to let things go. And then they get flashbacks of thinking, well, I should have done that. Oh my God, I wonder what's going on. Oh my God, I don't know what's going on in the world. I'm really fearful. I'm fearful of catching something. I better cover up. I'm in fear. And then what that does is, with stress, is it compounds. And so what ends up happening is stress changes brain chemistry. It's cortisol and stuff is released into the system, and it can actually change brain function to a point where certain areas of the brain just keep playing out, stressful scenarios over and over and over again. So again, to recap, is stress is a natural reaction to environmental conditions or sudden changes in the environment.
Yeah, and I just want to say that stress is a natural reaction, but it's not meant to be something that we have a prolonged experience to. It's supposed to serve us in that moment, so we either fight, run, or freeze, sort of thing. And that's important, because what you expose yourself to, and this goes into the realm of epigenetics. Where our environment, our reaction to it, is shaping and transforming our physiology. And why, if you're stuck in front of the boob tube, is that still a thing? I don't know. Anyway, if you're stuck in front of the television watching the stuff that's coming through, I mean, it's not that hard to see that there is a lot of information being pumped through that is fear generating, like it's putting you on edge. You may not be noticing it consciously, but it certainly seeps into the background. because, you know, it's not very hopeful in a lot of cases. But, you know, thank you for that, because that was a really great description of the stress conversation. And so from here, I thought, well, you know, what have you discovered in regards to, you know, working with this stress that you know, this loop that becomes maybe entrenched or embedded in ourselves? You know, how can we free ourselves from this?
Well, thanks for asking that, because I recognized early on, because one of the things, like I said, is I used to play music and the entertainment standard, and it used to give me headaches, and so I was on the hunt. I noticed that when I would lure things, that would go away. So then I started getting into that. Well, you know, what else could this kind of do? Is luring, you know, tuning. And I realized something else was, I just had a natural, intuitive hunch that language was part of the problem. And so, I mean, language is, we're using English. So English is a form of abbreviated other languages all stuck together. And it's got Latin and, you know, other, you know, stuff in it. And so even though it's a language of abbreviation, this, in part, it still retains a kind of a tie-in, so to speak, to what these original words were. Because I realized that you're talking about epigenetics. So you can literally, you can disempower somebody by flashing a symbol at them. I used to demonstrate this in workshops. You know, I used to like take, I'll just draw it really quickly. I used to take like a piece of paper, and then what I would do is on a piece of paper is I draw. What's going on? How did that malfunction? It's just it's
needs new batteries.
It's brand new. Let's see if this works. All right. So so specifically, what I would do is I would take an arrow like that, right, and then I'd test somebody, like holding that, right, and I'd take somebody and test them with an arrow that way. And sure enough, just by looking at an arrow, it would actually change their strength on how much strength they had.
Is that with muscle testing?
Through muscle testing. Yeah. I mean, that's not a scientific method by any means, but still, it's like it worked every time. And so, like, you know, very early on, I started getting into, because I was interested in psychic phenomena and things like that from a kid. So I started learning as much as I could on symbolism, language, and all that kind of stuff. And whether you like it or not, language is an electromagnetic transmitting utility. So even tone of language, because you could say one word and how you say it according to hi, hey, you know, like
yeah,
it can have an effect, right? So I realized that what was actually going on is in most things is when you've come from trauma and you go to talk about your problems. Well, your subconscious mind has it has nothing to lock onto in terms of linear time. We're aware of conscious. We're aware of time as a linear illusion because we have the illusion through our conscious interaction of reality that there's a daylight and a nighttime and the sun. So we've got this thing, you know, daytime, nighttime. So we have this conscious experience of time, but the subconscious doesn't really experience time quite the same way. So it doesn't know if something happened 2 minutes ago or 20 years ago. So when you go to somebody to talk about your problems and they say, tell me your story, right? You know those types, the billable hours types, right? Then what happens is you start talking about your story, and then all of a sudden you start getting physiological changes in the body. Your nervous system, your breathing starts to get shallow, you know, and you start to actually relive the trauma. Because again, as the subconscious doesn't know that what you're bringing up is if it's happening again. So that was something I really recognized was, you know what, is why don't I bypass the language? And so I'll do that with music. Well, then I realized something else about music. I realized that, again, is that what's happened is music over the as it formed to make it a form of entertainment, which largely music didn't become entertainment or used as a form of propaganda as a transmitting utility to around 3500 BC, and so in the advancements of music created where it's we created this arbitrary standard, and then we created the equal temperament based off of three things, which is a harmonic series, the mathematic series, and the geometric mean. But what that basically is it allows us to play octaves, right? So in order to do that, we have to create the tone spiral of how music is, and we have to kind of make it into a circle called the circle of fifths, so that we get octaves. And the whole reason for that is so you can play in different keys. Right? Those are all major keys going up modulating, right? So they didn't have that in the ancient world. And so I really wanted to understand harmonics and other things in terms of what makes sense to me, that if all of this stuff is recent in history in the last few hundred years, you were talking about epigenetics, right? So I started tracking down the origins of trauma, going way back to a series of disasters, of basically worldwide cataclysms. And so I understood that, and we're all alive today because we are the descendants of those people that survived.
Yes.
So I recognize that we all share a root consensus trauma. And so I started going deep into the esoteric and looking at stuff. And I started realizing that the power systems of this world, they actually use the symbology, of this trauma event, and it's worked into the symbology. And I know that's like a whoa, right? It's like, okay, well, how do you put what? It would take a lot to show you that, but I can trace back this stuff. And so my reasoning for that was because I thought, well, you know what is what if there's a way to be able to work epigenetically using harmonics to release stress and so much more. And that was kind of like the start of things. And I originally got this and had this instrument designed. My original innovation that I wanted to do was way too much money to get this thing built. So I wanted to get a beta, get something that was already out, because that's what. So when you innovate, there's different types of innovations. So usually what you would start off as a beta model, which is you would innovate something that's already on the market. So I looked at something that was already on the market. It's a common thing called a monochord. Monochord's been around since times of Pythagoras, right? So I thought, well, there's ways of kind of innovating that to create the sound geometry a certain way, because once you put a string to tension, it becomes a straight line. That was another thing I understood, that is like, especially with me working with telluric energy currents around ancient sites, I realized there's differences between strings and bells and different types of instruments with different timbres would interact differently with the Earth's natural fields, right? So I'm kind of throwing a lot at the kitchen sink, but specifically is this whole thing came around because I really wanted to bypass language, because when you use language in trying to coach for stress management or releasing trauma or whatever, is language can also reintegrate the trauma back just by talking about it.
Yeah, and just on that, you know, because I've been studying energy medicine now for about 4.5, 5 years. I myself am a Reiki practitioner and teacher. Yeah, go for it. You know, what I found was interesting. There's a video that most people who are into this topic have probably already seen it, with a chap by the name of Greg Braden, who went to a medicineless hospital in China, and medicineless, and the person had a stomach ulcer. It was a stomach ulcer or a bladder ulcer, I can't recall. Anyway, but it was a tumor, and they basically they had a what is it called? An ultrasound. They had a still image of the before, and then they had a live action image of what was happening, and you can look it up. And what happens is that, you know, these people are standing around the patient, the client, the person who's being healed here. There's 3 of them, and they're all chanting. And what happened is that over time, over about 2.5 minutes, you can watch the live footage of the ulcer or the tumor shrinking down to nothing. Now, he didn't, in that talk, he didn't give away all the information, but I've watched plenty of his subsequent talks on this particular thing because he gets asked a lot of questions about it. Obviously, people want to know about the legitimacy of it. But one thing they didn't mention in the original video is that they did a brain scan, and they found that the left hemisphere of the brain was nearly completely shut off while this process was going on. And that was interesting because our linguistic mind for understanding language apparently occupies that part of our brain more so than, say, our right-hand hemisphere. And
that's the part of your brain that's involved in all this cerebral ego, the logistics, and it's the other part of your brain that was involved in all this stuff, creativity and stuff. Oh, and by the way, it was the left side of my brain that was damaged. That's why I've struggled with the language. I've always got to try and think of what I, you know, just a sight because I would stutter really badly. I had to learn how to speak again.
There's a great TED talk about a lady who was a neuroscientist, I believe, or a neurologist, and she had an experience where the left-hand side of her brain shut down and all she had was her right hand operating. And she comes out on the stage and she's holding an actual brain with a cord and all the rest of it. It's pretty crazy. I don't know if you've seen this. I can't remember what the lady's thing is. It's great. But she speaks of the experience she had because the whole experience had just completely changed. You know, she could see a telephone with the numbers on it, but she had no idea how to manage it. But what the name of the talk is that the right-hand side of the brain is where happiness resides, because she was completely happy and relaxed and all the rest of it. And they talk, and I've heard someone else say, I can't remember if it was Einstein or someone else saying that, you know, this is the right hand side of the brain is where it's where happiness is or where things happen, and the left-hand side is the faithful servant sort of thing. And we get, you know, being taught to write with our right hands, with our right-handed, which is, you know, obviously connected to the left-hand side of our brain because, you know, the left looks after the right looks after the left. And when we look back at ancient history, we see that, you know, we look at languages that wrote from right to left instead of left to right, like Hebrew. And they also had, you know, the even more ancient, you know, that the language wouldn't just go left to right. It would actually it would follow the plow. And so it would go left to right, right to left, and things like this. And so, you know, current education, you know, if you're a lefty, you know, you'll generally get, you know, slapped on the wrist and, right, you need to start practicing like this. And what I noticed is that the kids that I taught in guitar, the ones that were left-handed, could also play right-handed, and they could do just a bit. They were nearly always, like I would say 99.9% of them were ambidextrous, whereas the right-handed kids, like I'm a right-handed, there's a few things I can do left-handed, but generally speaking, I'm a right-handed person. You know, I found that very interesting as well, you know, that, but anyway, what you're saying about, you know, not using language.
Well, it's fascinating, right? I don't know if you'll see this on camera. You see that?
Hang on, I'll flick over so you can see it. Hang on, there you go.
See that kind of scar right there? See that scar right there?
Yes.
That one right there.
Yes.
That's from getting the belt as a kid in Scotland, because I'm left-handed.
Craziness.
They actually strapped my brother down because he was originally, and they forced him to be right-handed. And they vilified left-handed people because left-handed people were they would have that intuitive flow, that natural creativity, and a lot more.
That's really interesting. You're right, because they're using a fear tactic to get you to conform to a certain way of thinking, and and so what's happened is over time, more and more people. I mean, it's funny because the Japanese also use right to left as well, but they go down. I don't recall what Sanskrit is. Do you know if Sanskrit's left to right or right to left? No, not sure. Okay, but anyway, so so you've developed this, using an existing sort of instrument template of the monochord. And you developed, and obviously, you were working with a company to help develop this instrument. And so, if you could tell us a little, what you can, because I know some of the stuff you can't share, or you choose not to share.
So the innovation is a trade secret innovation, so I can't share it. But specifically, like I said, I realized, well, you can't innovate a straight line. You can't innovate a string. Once you put it to tension, it's a straight line. So it wasn't a company. I was searching all over North America. I couldn't find anybody to build this the way the specs that I needed it to. And it was finally I found somebody across the pond, and I'm not going to name what country. And specifically, it took a month and a half to correspondence back and forth with the manufacturer for him to wrap how to basically perfect this by shaping it imperfectly, right? So there's a whole other thing having to do with Pythagorean comma, right? It's like it's one of the things that's avoided in entertainment, because in order to make entertainment music so that you can play in all 12 keys, right? You had to take the spiral and bend it artificially into a circle. And so by doing that, it's ever so slightly, and so by doing that is it almost creates like a dulling sensation. It's nothing that you could even really hear with a human ear. It's more a feeling. And again, this it's all about feeling, because I recognize that what I understand now is, are you familiar with piezoelectricity?
Not at a deep level, but I have a sort of a rough sort of overview of it. Squeezing a crystal to get a charge out of it and so forth.
Right. So let's talk about that, because you mentioned that. Right. So you squeeze a piece of quartz or a piece of silica mineral or whatever. But let's talk about quartz, because you've got minerals and you've got micro crystals of quartz in your bone. So when you squeeze a quartz crystal, two things happen. It creates a slight weak electrical charge, and it also creates a very, very slight light photon. You can actually get light by squeezing quartz. If you can exert like over 500 pounds of pressure to a cubic millimeter of quartz, it will light, and it will also give off electricity. So what I believe now, going back, was when my skull was impacted, it changed my skull where I'm sensitive to magnetic fields. And this is why I'm able to get pings and stuff when I'm listening into somebody's field or whatever. And I don't really like to go to the whole new age kind of stuff, because it can be passed off as woo-woo. But again, as I can explain this stuff, it kind of created my ability to kind of like listen in, kind of like a receiver, like you're tuning on a radio station, ever so slightly. Now, it's quite interesting. So this whole thing is when you squeeze quartz, it gives off a form of piezoelectricity. And I think that was important to mention.
Yeah, and also, sorry, yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I might be wrong here, but I do recall hearing something that there are certain substances, compounds, materials that make up the largest part of the visible universe as we know it. One of those is hydrogen, I believe, is one of the most popular things, but also silica and quartz is, I believe, one of the most predominant sort of minerals on this planet, and we're not silicon-based life forms, so to speak, but we do have it within us. It's not we're a carbon-based, but I mean, I'm probably punching above my weight here in regards to this topic, but we have a relationship to this planet. When you talk about telluric lines, that is often overlooked, but when we look back through, history and what the indigenous peoples of this planet talk about, the relationship to the planet is, it just is. We are part of this biosphere, and so when en masse large amounts of us are, say, under stress, this is going to affect the other cells and the other organisms on the planet. And also, if we're looking after them, this is why we go spend time in nature, because it helps to sort of clean us up from our sort of artificial smog and things like that, which is funny because, even synthetic compounds and elements and things are still born from nature. It's just they've kind of been changed and twisted a little bit.
Inverted, I call it inverted because that's the ultimate game plan is inversion.
Yeah.
Inversion of everything. Inversion of history, inversion of science, inversion of medicine.
And this push, and like we're talking about with education before, and we didn't go into it too deeply, but I mean, the listeners will probably get a basic understanding that we're, talking about things like the arts, music, and things like this are generally considered quite secondary in the learning process, nowadays.
Look in the learning process, right? So basically is we don't have proper education. We have schooling. And the job of schooling is obedience training.
Outcome-based education.
And so, I mean, there's enough experts that talk about this stuff. You just got to dig this stuff up. Is what it actually is a university is a college of businesses, and so its mandate is to basically create. It's the insurance companies that's actually running the world behind patents. That's what's truly going on, and these are the old boys club going back to the days of merchant marine shipping, and so what they did was they took that old limited liability system. This is why you get corporations with LLCs. I mean, the word corporation comes from corpus, which is the res of a trust. This was all estate trusts that went back to the days of shipping. So specifically, as everything has a commercial value attached to it, and it's underwritten. So then, therefore, an occupation has an underwriting to it. So then you go and you buy an Ivy League education or whatever. Is what you're doing is you're basically buying in to be licensed under commercial limited liability to be able to have that professional, accreditation. It doesn't mean that you're smart. Some of the most stupidest people on the planet are PhDs.
It's almost like
Twitter followers.
It's almost like a cult of intellectualism. That's sort of like, yeah.
The way science is now, it's dogmatic.
Yeah.
It's the most dogmatics of religions, right? And all you need to do is look at the banned TED Talk by Rupert Sheldrake, and you'll see that science has dogmas. Oh, it sure does. Right? Just take gravity for an example, right? Gravity, what most people don't know that light is mostly responsible for gravity, more gravity. Right? I could share you. It's too bad I can't put stuff up here and share things so that the things coming out of my mouth, I can back it up. Right?
Yes, I understand.
Right, but specifically, yeah. So basically, is you have all this stuff. It's all underwritten. So when someone is buying an education, what they're actually doing is they're actually buying a license to pirate under that commercial system. It's the only way I can say it. It's a pirate license. That's what a privilege is. It was a liberty. It was originally given to sailors. I mean, I can go any one thing in this topic. I don't want to go for 4 hours, but there's so much that I had to learn from an innovative standpoint of what's going on, what's running these things behind patents and all these things. And so you have this thing called Blue Shield University, right? So Blue Shields is was funding this stuff. And it's funding a lot of the mechanistic mainstream science. And this is where we get into big money. The billions of dollars that's running into Harvard is actually is larger than some of the GDP of some developing countries for Harvard.
Yeah.
Now, we all know Harvard is oh God, I've been doing a lot of study up on Harvard because you know there's a lot of military intelligence and central intelligence recruits from Harvard, and right and that kind of stuff. So. And then we're seeing the scandals that's been coming out recently. You know, there's this Harvard guy that's been in collusion with stuff that's been going on in the news. I don't want to drop into that, but anyway, so you know, it's all just going to come out in the works. That a lot of these places are you know, they've got their hands in the honeypots, and what they're actually doing is there's like I said, there's stuff that's being shelved. There's a lot of money being made behind the scenes, and yeah, so it's just natural to you know just see that when you're going through education, it's not the end to be all. So here's the thing is about that system is what it does is it actually burns the brain out. It's a form of phasing, and they also do it to doctors. By you know the workload of a PhD, what it does is it literally short circuits your brain, so that you become an unquestionable repeater.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is here's the thing is you invest so much time and so much moolah in the education. When something comes along that's an innovation that upsets your worldview, oh, you're going to dig your heels in and attack.
Yeah, that's an important point that you know, because you've got such an investment in that in the institution. You know, you've got the hat and the badge, and you've got the you know the coffee mug and the big wavy finger saying this is the club I belong to, and so you know don't tread on my territory. You know.
Yeah, these are my accreditations. And how dare you innovate? Because it upsets my apple cart of what I believe in.
So when we see people who step outside of these sort of, you know, and Bruce Lipton is actually a really good example of that, because as soon as he started sharing his observations about, you know, about the reality of, you know, the fact that, you know, 95% plus of our diseases we're not predisposed by our genetic expression, so to speak. Yeah, you know, by just, you know, hereditary things, you know, and as soon as he was he was lecturing at places like Harvard and Stanford and places like that. As soon as he put a toe over the line, man, the bloody wolves jumped on him and he's out of the club. Go on, out you go. And, you know, and suddenly the whole man's life's work is, you know, like everything's just like, sorry, that's the end of that, you know. But, you know, I just wanted to just slip back into the,
I keep going off topic. Yeah, right?
I understand it though, because this is important context, people, because, you know, it's even like the whole cannabis debate here in New Zealand and certain places of the world. You know, all the information's out there, but we keep getting conversations like, oh, we're going to wait for the research to come in. And it's like the research is already available, you know.
I was innovating stuff in consulting years ago using systems with water to create special types of water that you feed to cannabis to grow it up 3 times higher in half the time. And, you know, I was originally on other stuff. We were taking germination rates from 90 days down to 45 days.
Wow,
that stuff's not funded by school.
No. And so this is what we're saying, people, is that there are large interests that do not want certain information to be made available, and that's why it's so important to be, you know, your own researcher and do your due diligence. But what I wanted to talk about next, Brian, is, so you've developed this technology, working with people and helping them to remove stress. And so I'd like to talk about the personal experiences that you've had the feedback from people, or the observations you've had, say, working with animals and so forth. Things that can things that'll really hit home with people who are maybe looking for something. Because the bottom line is that when people start looking for innovations like yourself, or they come to me for Reiki and that, in a lot of cases, they've gone elsewhere. They've gone down the traditional track. They haven't had any joy. They've tried changing their diets. They've tried, exercising. They've tried meditating. They've tried lots of other things, but, they're looking for new things. And so, I'd love to hear about some of the feedback and some of the personal experiences that you think can share that the listeners can relate to.
Sure, I'll share that feedback. I'll go right into that after about 1 minute, because I'll bring something up first, and that's this whole thing. What really gave me the green light for this, and now first off, is like I said, is I haven't put a lot of stuff out in the public, because I have before, and it's upset the apple cart, and I've been scrutinized quite severely because of it, and so. Every week I get somebody trying to get me to spill the beans on stuff, and, right? So one of the things that really gave me the green light was there was research done in 2006, early 2006, and it was released. And you can actually Google this. You can Google a thing from Physics Magazine called "Why the Inner Ear is Snail Shaped." And it's the spiral shape of the cochlea, which is the inner ear, enhances its ability to detect low-frequency sounds. Calculations show that the inner ear is shaped like a snail shell in order to boost sensitivity to low frequencies. Observers have long wondered whether the shape of the cochlea improves hearing or merely saves space. Researchers calculate that its spiral shape effectively boosts the strengths of vibrations caused by sound, especially for low pitches. All right, so that's quite important. And according to Daphne Manasu, I can't say her last name, Manasusaki of Vanderbilt University in Tennessee, its shape enhances the vibrational wave motions that translate into nerve signals. So that's an important piece of information. Calculations show as the wave progresses, energy increases near the outside edge of the spiral ear shape rather than remaining evenly spread across it. So low frequencies travel the furthest into the spiral ear, so the effect is strongest for them. Now that's really interesting. So basically, is this research came out since the cells that detect the vibrations respond especially well to pressure differences between the inner and outer edge, the concentration of low frequency of sound intensity translates into, ready for this, higher sensitivity. So folks, the research was done in 2006 that when you lower pitch, when you lower frequency, it becomes an increase of efficacy for sound healing and for music therapy application. Oh, there you go. Right, so there's this whole debate that they're trying to cover up stuff that there's no, sound doesn't make a difference and blah, 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 blah. No, it's right there. It's actually, this is Occam's razor. It's very simple logic, is that what happens is low frequency comes into the ear, and the ear is shaped like a shell. Now, you know how like when you're miles away from a concert, what do you hear? Do you hear the violin or do you hear the bass? It's the bass. Physics, bass travels farther, right? So low frequency, right? The amplitude, or right, it travels farther. So basically, low frequency travels into the ear spiral, up the shape of the spiral canal farther than high frequency. So this is, folks, this is why. And there's many arguments out there, and I just kind of want to flatten the curve here and say that specifically higher pitches, the reason why it sounds bright and thin is because it's coming into the ear shallow. like a low tide. It's not reaching all the way up the curve, like low frequency. And at the lip of the curve, which is what the research is showing, is the low frequencies it turns into higher sensitivity in nerve signals. So in other words, you can have an increase of efficacy of using low frequency to release trauma out of the nervous system. And that's where I wanted to go with my innovation and stuff like that. Is like, we'll talk towards the end of the talk about why I didn't put certain things out, because I was, but specifically, and so what I decided to do was all the stuff that happened to me, because I was targeted quite badly from it, it created a lot of stress and trauma in myself. So the reason why I actually had this instrument was I wanted to use myself as a guinea pig. And I used that to help my own nervous system. And it was, holy crap, was it effective? And then I started helping some friends. And then I started helping some people on Facebook. And then I thought, you know what? Well, you know what? I'm dealing with people. And do you remember how I said one thing I've always been very clear about is inviting people into the process to try things for themselves, not trying to ram down some kind of argument why some frequency is more superior than another. I don't believe in that.
Personal direct experience.
Exactly, exactly. And then that takes me out of the data, because the data isn't fudged by what I'm trying to suggest, right? So anyway, so that's what I ended up doing was I thought, well, you know what, is people are people can bullshit. I'm going to start working with animals. Animals don't have an ego. So that's what I did was I started volunteering with rescue animals and stuff and sick horses and stuff that had trauma or emotional stuff. Holy crap. It's like, because they don't have an ego, they work through their stuff like almost instantaneously. And I would see it. I would see the animal would go into a trauma release almost immediately. They'd start releasing stuff out. I worked with a little dog that was a rescue dog that was on the streets of Los Angeles for 3 years, tearing through garbage to try and keep alive. And this dog was so skittish, it wouldn't come near me. And, so I managed to get the owner to, calm the dog so I could approach the dog with the instrument. And I was working. And then after about 2 minutes, the dog's jaw was just going like that. It was releasing all of the trauma from all the years of the tension of having to tear through garbage bags. And then after that session, the dog came up and put its head in my lap. I was like, whoa, you gotta be kidding. It freaked the owner out because the owner had never seen that, because the dog's always running away, barking, skittish. That's just one example. I mean, there was an animal wrangler who works for Hollywood movies up here in Vancouver. And so she works, whenever there's a big movie, they're calling for animals, she's the one they call. And I had helped her, and they'd have a bear cub, a grizzly bear cub in for a movie, and it was extremely sick. And they were going to put the bear down, on the Friday. They called me on the Thursday to see if I could do anything. So I went over there, and actually I've got that in the video. You can go watch that.
Where is the video?
It's on the YouTube Harmonic Integration YouTube. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. We can share links later.
Yeah, I'm just making notes. That's cool.
Right. So basically, they were going to euthanize the bear. They were going to take it to the vet and put it down the next day. And I said, well, I'll see what I can do. The animal handler said, do not get in the cage with the bear. The bear is extremely vicious. It's dehydrated. It hasn't drank in days, and it's biting and scratching at us. So I was like, what do? I jumped in the cage with the instrument. Anyway, I got it. I have it on film, and I was able to calm the little bear down enough, and I was able to actually touch the bear. And so I actually have that footage. And
I've seen it. Yeah, it's quite impressive.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and the claws on this thing, they're almost the length of my fingers. So I was like, Jesus, one swipe from this thing would tear me right over. But anyway, That's just one. There's so many. I mean, the horses as well. I work with many horses and stuff, like releasing emotional stuff out of there. So again, as I decided to work with animals to really get a good sense of my technique in the harmonics and stuff like that, because I recognize that again, is music as we see it. I mean, there's hundreds of years worth of music history, but I consider that a blink of an eye, right? Because the ancient world would have used harmonics. And then the other thing is as well as the ancient world made everything out of wood and gut string. They didn't have metal tuning pegs. So that's another reason why raising concert pitch for music entertainment is a recent thing. People keep making this mistake that they knew Hertz values in the ancient world. How could they have done that? The way of measuring sound in Hertz is a modern invention. It's a recent thing. It's based off of the arbitrary length of a second. So again, this whole thing is that the ancient world, we were much more connected to nature back then. So we were also within its range, so to speak. And that's what I understand, and that's why I've been campaigning for years for separate preservation pitch between 427 hertz and 438 hertz. There's reasons for that, but we can talk about that later if we have time.
Yeah, no worries. Well, I mean, we're just about to hit the 90-minute mark, but if you want to, I mean, we've still got some things we can talk about, and I'm happy to hold on. If you want to do, say, another half hour.
Well, or we could do it another time or whatever. Because people, I'm sure they're busy and stuff.
Okay. Well, like I said, I'm going to upload this to YouTube so people can watch it when they want to. But, there was a couple of things that I really wanted to cover in regards to things that, say, people who might be interested in contacting you, how they can relate to it. Obviously, the website, your website stream, scrolling along the bottom there. But, obviously, when we're talking about transmitting sound, say if you're running for this from home and you're going through a computer interface, so people will be like on the other side of the planet. And, you've talked about this before about how the internet will compress the information. So, when people, like, for example, the technology requirements, let's just quickly run over that. So what do people need? Say if they're interested and they want to get in touch with you and have a session, what is the basic requirements that they need?
Okay, so the first thing that it's interesting, like I said, is animals just go through their stuff really fast. But for some reason, through all of our egos and the way that we construct things, is we naturally, we're tactile creatures. We want to touch things. That's the reason why people will go over to an elevator, and even though the light is on, they'll still go and push the button. Right?
Same at a crossing, you got to press the button just to make sure.
Right. So people want to test things out, so to speak. So one of this misconceptions or whatever, and this is another increase of efficacy, another innovation that I realized is that I'm invoking harmonics a certain way, not just with this instrument, but I'm also doing it with my voice. And so what I'm using is it's kind of like regressing you back before the days of cataclysm, before the days of all the trauma on planet Earth and stuff, and it releases a lot of stuff. And so I recognize that that you don't have to be in person with the instrument on you to do that. And so I have had it tested. I've had it tested by bioscanner remotely, and normally I have a session that's like an hour. We talk about like what stuff's going on in your life, and then we work on bridging the gap between the unconscious mind and the conscious mind, so that anything that resides there can basically come out. And when that does, I see it all the time, as most people will go into what I call as a micro trauma release, your fingers, and you can see videos of that, on the site, and you see them, and what that's doing, it's releasing out of the nervous system. You get these like twitches and stuff. So I realized that trying to broadcast this over the internet, I'm dealing with internet protocols that compress audio. Now that's common sense. Every communication company in the world, Be Live, you're listening to me, but you're actually hearing a facsimile of what my voice really is. It's being digitally processed and compressed, and then it's being sent out, and it's being compressed again, and so on and so on. So you're not getting the real deal of what I really sound like, through this interface. And I recognize that. And like I said, that's what companies do to save money, because it costs a huge amount of money to try and stream an uncompressed, high definition audio, right? So what I have is a specific piece of technology in my recording studio here that's connected in the sound booth where the instrument is. What I do is I can stream uncompressed high definition peer-to-peer directly from my computer directly to either your cell phone or your computer. And it's amazing. It sounds like you're actually inside the instrument. It's a full high definition live sound experience.
Yeah, I've got to say, just from my personal experience, because I've had a session with Brian, and it's quite something else. Like, I haven't had this experience before, and I've listened to various different types of audio technologies and things for various things, and this is quite a unique thing. And so I just wanted to say, as far as the technology requirements for the people that are interested in having a session, they obviously need to have a good internet connection, I would assume, and a computer, obviously. But headphones versus earbuds.
Yeah, if you can have really good headphones.
So over ears, not those little things that covers the ear canal. Or
the best if you have good high broadcast quality cans, or like good headphones or whatever.
Like
but again, like those, exactly. Those are great AKGs. Yeah, that's what I use. I use AKGs as well. But specifically, it's not totally reliant on that. Again, my whole idea was to create this as a new innovation to be able to stream sound healing across the world in a very easy way, and more importantly, a very efficient way, so that you're getting something that's a real deal. It's not a placebo, right? Yeah. And so specifically is, so I stream a session, and so what I actually do is I record it for you. Now we set intent while we do that in what we're actually going to be working in. So what's happening is while you're there and you're receiving a session, and everyone's different. They report all kinds of things, stuff from memories and stuff that floods out. And what happens is it comes up to be released. So for some reason, is within a 72-hour period of having a session, it's still integrating with you. And so you kind of journal, in between sessions or whatever. There's no such thing as a magic bullet. It's good to take a session, but as I recommend at least 4 sessions, I've got like a discount package, and I've discounted even more because of this crisis that's going on. And so people are actually having a lot of trouble with finances right now. So I recognize that. So I discounted massive slashes on my prices to try and help people, because what stress is doing, in the fear from all the negative impact from social media and fear propaganda, is that's actually putting people's immune system at risk. It's compromising your immune system during this time. And so being able to be stress-free, or at least stress less, and especially sleep better. And that's why I kind of also created a package. It's kind of like a sonic self-care package. I've got a bundle that you can buy, and you can listen to it, and you can do your own sound healing at home from that, or you can take a custom session that's tailored just to you, and I record that for you so that you have it and you can listen. And so I'm working across the board with all kinds of people that's having trouble sleeping. It's extremely effective with that. It's extremely effective for releasing body stressors. I work with people who have gone through narcissistic abuse, and they've got self-confidence issues, and they want to get out of the targeting. I work with targeted individuals who have been suppressed. I'm very well aware of that kind of stuff and being censored. And also I work with general people, but I also work with small businesses to improve their employees' time and productivity. So it's kind of a wide spectrum of people. And like when I was testing it and stuff, one of the early tests was I got to work with somebody with MS who had it for 17 years. And actually that's on the video. You can see that gentleman. And he was paralyzed for 2 years, couldn't move. And in one 30-minute session, he's got his hands over his head.
Wow. Bang, baby.
Right. So I can't make medical claims, and I'm not gonna, because I'm not using this as a therapy. I'm using this in coaching, because the real thing is, the real deal is, I don't heal you. You heal yourself. I just provide a platform and a facilitation. And what that does is the harmonics and the way I'm doing it, it bypasses a lot of the stuff that's we've absorbed in the modern world. And it kind of just resets you. And you feel it. It's the testimonials is really cool.
Yeah, and that was a really great sort of good way to sort of share the guts of it there, because my own personal experience with that one session that I had with you was I mean, obviously some people, you've said that some people have the same thing where would you be okay if I just quickly shared?
Yeah, because a lot of people, they feel the circling. And and this is, again, this whole thing. I can go real deep into quantum physics, but I don't have to. We don't have to go under the hood. It's the whole thing is, people want you to describe the whole engine, but yet people don't need to know how a car works to turn the key and drive and go and use it as a vehicle to go get groceries, right? Yeah. Same kind of thing is, I'm using this innovative technology. I don't need to go under all the quantum physics on it, because the end result is it works.
That's it. And this idea of like our obsession with needing to understand the mechanics before we can put it out, just because we don't understand the mechanics of something does not sort of exclude it from a scientific method. This is about, how does it work, and so, I mean, this is a hard question, but I need to ask this, are there any, side effects to this, that people should be aware of, when they have a session, is there anything that people should know about?
Okay, so it's non-invasive, meaning it's the sound decibels are not that loud. It's gentle acoustic harmonics. I use a little bit of reverb, which means echo, on my voice, and that's it. So in terms of adverse stuff, there's no adverse side effects, but there are beneficial side effects. Beneficial side effects are letting go of negative patterns of behavior, letting go of things like people pleasing, getting a better night's sleep. That's a side effect. Building a resilience to stressors in the environment. Becoming more grounded. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, those are effects. If one thing I do have to say is, this can be uncomfortable for some people who are not ready to do their own healing. Now, there's several types of people on this planet, and most people, even though they think they want to be healed, they don't want to be healed. They want to be saved. They want something. They want a gimmick. They want this. They want a magic bullet. They want a pill. People have been friggin' programmed to pop a pill, that the pill is what's going to heal them. Only you heal yourself, right? So
that's a very key point.
And I deal with this all the time, is what this can do is, if you're going into this and you say, like, you're coming from childhood trauma, or you're coming from something, from a traumatic event, and you've blocked it, well, that's repressed in your subconscious. What this does is it builds a bridge between your conscious mind and subconscious, so that you can almost lucid dream the trauma out. And so what happens is you can start, your constructive mind starts to construct things based on your belief system. So also treat this as almost kind of like a sonic ink blot test. So the idea of an ink blot test is, you know, you look at an ink blot and, oh, that looks like a dog. That looks like a sailboat, right? That looks like a scary man with a knife. But it's none of that. It's just an ink blot. It's your constructive mind that's constructing that through your belief, right? And so that you know, a therapist or whatever can gauge of, well, this is what you're thinking in your mind. Well, the same kind of thing is when you're listening to this, and if it may feel scary, it's because that there's that fear is inside you, and so what it's doing is it's bringing it out. So I always say to people that if they're going through that kind of thing, is just be aware that that's actually is finally coming up to be released. And so just think of it as like you're watching an action drama on a movie screen and you're in the audience eating popcorn. So in other words, observe rather than participate, because when stuff comes up and if you feel anxiety, it's not that it's making you anxious. You're making you anxious. It's finally the repression on the repressed memories that's being pushed back is being released. Because, you know, you got to feel it to heal it.
Great. I love that. Yeah, I saw you post that the other day and I thought, man, that's a swinging number right there, baby.
True, yeah. And that's why everybody, I should say everybody, but the majority of people who think they want to be healed, they want to be saved, want someone else to do it for them. They want something, give me it quick. Right. Yeah. And then they won't face their inner shadow. And part of this is about clearing out the shadow, clearing out the subconscious darkness, because everyone has that. And if you're only focused in on only pushing away all the bad and only focusing on loving light, you know, banging a tuning fork, oh, loving light, you're losing the plot, because you've got to actually, we're here as part of life's reality to work through our stuff, work through our karma, balance the energy. We're in a polar landscape called space-time. It's polar. There's opposites. We're here to actually learn balance. And how you learn balance is you've got to be brave enough to go into the inner underworld. And again, as I also have studied shamanic technique, and I use that with my harmonic overtones in certain parts and passages to actually willfully bring that stuff out. You know, it's like purging. You know, when you do a cleanse, if you're doing a cleanse in your body, it's to purge toxins out. If you're doing a fast, that's to purge toxins. You know, if you're doing a heavy metal cleanse, it's to get the metal out of your body, right?
Yeah, and the process of expressing that may not be necessarily all that pleasant. It's like any healing process, you know. There's going to be some discomfort involved.
Right. So that's when this whole thing was around side effects, right? So it's not a negative side effect. What is it? It's a realization effect.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing is, that's why I only work with those who are committed, who is willing to shovel their own rubble.
Oh, that's another good one. Oh, dropping them today, brother. All right then. So, well, that's probably a really great place to sort of tie things up here. Unless there was, you know, anything else you wanted to go into.
I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate this platform because, like I said, I'm going through a little bit of thing where, as for me, for organic or advertising, I'm being censored because this has upset the apple cart with some people who don't want this technology out, and you know, so I appreciate you know, having this platform to speak. And again, is what I also have is a discounted series of sessions for this special stuff, so I could share those links. And yeah, I really appreciate this. And again, I think that if we all do our individual part to really move through our own inner process and do this healing, then what that's actually going to do is that's going to allow you to be able to see the polar landscape of what's being presented to us as fear-based media propaganda and stuff, so that it just won't have an effect on you. You see right through it.
Perfect. Yeah. And you know what, guys, right now is a great time. We've got time. We've got so much time right now for, going inside. We're literally being forced to go inside, literally forced. So, what a great time to reflect, to go deep, to dive down into things, and to go, because these things, they're going to come up one way or another. And, it's, and there's many paths up the mountain. And I think that there is definitely always a space for a gentle approach. But having someone there alongside you to go, through with it, with you through it is a really great way to go. And because you don't need to do this by yourself, and there's people who have had personal experience with this journey. And like Brian said, this is these shamanic traditions. There's such a wonderful area to explore. And I'm just saying, I want to say too that Brian. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for allowing me to help you share your message. Obviously you're very grateful to me, but I'm essentially very grateful to you too, because as a colleague and a friend, you've imparted a lot of wisdom and teachings to me that I've garnered great benefit from, and I know that anyone that connects with you will also take great benefit, even just from just hanging out with you. You've got a real light going on there, and you're a real soldier. And you've shared enough with me to give me a conviction that you have had some hard times imposed on you, and you're hanging in there. So you're a real pillar of strength. And I know that a lot of people who are going to watch this who know you will attest to that as well. So, thank you so much. And so if anyone wants to get in touch with Brian, you can you'll see the website listed there, briantcollins.com. And and I'll also, on the YouTube description, I'll put some contact links, and also the link to the video that he's created that shows like the him working with animals and such, and people can go from there. And sorry, Brian, go.
And the best way to contact me directly actually is not actually through the website, but through Harmonic Integration on Facebook, the Harmonic Integration page. You reach me directly through there.
Okay, so I'll put that on the in the YouTube description as well. And thank you so much, everyone. I hope you're all doing all great out there. And please, Brian's offering his services at the moment at a very discounted price, obviously, to reflect the times that we're in. And so I'd fully encourage you to take him up on this, reach out to him, and this may be the best thing that you've never heard of, truly. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks,
everybody.